The moment you realize a leader has crossed the line is never subtle. It starts as a small warning, a strange comment, a tone that feels sharper than usual, and then it escalates. Fast. That's exactly what happened with Donald Trump this week. In a world where we've seen him yell, insult, and threaten before something new is happening, his behavior is not just loud, it's alarming. It's not just political, it's personal, and it's now colliding with the law in a way that could change everything. Because this isn't about one angry post or one heated press conference. This is about power, ego, and legal reality all smashing together in real time. And the worst part, it's not just affecting Trump, it's affecting the entire system. So what triggered this latest eruption? It wasn't a random moment. It wasn't a media headline. It was a direct challenge from people inside his own world, people who have supported him, defended him, and protected him for years. And when they questioned him, he didn't respond like a president. He responded like someone who feels cornered. That's the key. The most dangerous moments come when a powerful person realizes the walls are closing in, when they feel the law, the courts, and even their own allies are no longer on their side, and that is where we are right now. In this video, we're going to break down the exact moment Trump's behavior turned alarming, the signs you might have missed, and what it means for his future and for the country. Because this is not just a political story, it's a story about whether the system can hold up when ego fights the law. So buckle up, because the collision is happening and it's happening fast. Now, let's rewind for a second and identify the trigger, because it matters. It's not just that Trump is acting out. It's what he's reacting to that reveals the real problem. The trigger wasn't a Democrat. It wasn't the media. It wasn't even a policy disagreement. It was something much closer to home, pressure from the people who should be his closest allies, the people who have built their careers on loyalty to him. It began with a moment that should have been routine, a budget hearing, a congressional committee doing its job, asking questions, pressing for answers, trying to understand what the next fiscal year would look like. But for Trump, it didn't feel like a routine hearing, it felt like a betrayal, because he watched his own party members ask questions that in any other administration would be seen as normal oversight. Questions about funding, questions about priorities, questions about consequences, questions that are supposed to be part of the process. But Trump interpreted them as personal attacks, and that's when the real alarm bells should have gone off. Because a healthy leader can handle scrutiny. A healthy leader can take questions and respond with facts. A healthy leader can even accept criticism without turning it into a war. But Trump didn't do that. Instead, he did what he always does when he feels threatened. He went on the attack. Hard, loud, public. He started posting on social media, firing off accusations, naming names, and painting his own party members as enemies. And that's where the situation became dangerous. Because once the rhetoric escalates, the behavior becomes unpredictable. And when the rhetoric is coming from someone with such a massive following, it's not just words, it becomes a call to action. Now, think about what this means. If Trump reacts this way to normal oversight, what happens when the pressure gets worse? What happens when the law starts closing in, when the courts begin to move, when the investigations begin to tighten? If this is how he responds to a budget hearing, how will he respond to the next legal blow? The next court decision, the next indictment? That is the real danger, because this is not just a man having a bad day. This is a pattern of escalating rage, of escalating threats, of escalating instability, and it is happening at the exact moment the legal system is finally starting to catch up to him. So yes, the trigger was a budget hearing, but the real story is what the trigger revealed. A leader who cannot handle accountability, a leader who sees oversight as betrayal, and a leader whose ego is now colliding with the law in a way that is increasingly dangerous for everyone involved. Here's where things get really concerning, because once Trump started reacting, he didn't stop at insults. He didn't stop at calling people weak or traitors. He escalated, and he escalated in a way that's not just political, it's threatening. This is the part that separates a normal political dispute from a full-blown crisis. When a leader moves from criticism to intimidation, from anger to threats, from debate to coercion, that's when the system starts to crack. And that's exactly what happened. After the initial budget hearing, Trump went on a posting spree. Not a couple of messages, not a few angry lines, but a continuous barrage of attacks naming members of his own party, accusing them of betrayal and implying that they deserved consequences. And that's not just rhetoric, that's a shift in tone. Because the problem is not the words themselves. The problem is what those words do. When you have millions of followers, when you have a base that has already shown a willingness to act violently, when you have supporters who view your words as commands, then your posts become more than just opinions. They become instructions. And that is what makes this dangerous. Because the moment a leader implies that political opponents are traitors, that they should be dealt with, that patriots know what to do, he is not just attacking them politically, he is creating a target. And then to make it worse, he did something even more extreme. He posted the office phone numbers of those lawmakers, and he told his followers to call them. Now, think about what that means. This is not just a political attack. This is a direct invitation to harassment, a direct invitation to intimidation, a direct invitation to threats, and the result was immediate. Staffers started receiving threatening calls. Lawmakers reported messages saying they should be harmed, that they should be punished, that they should be watched. Security had to be increased. Capitol Police had to respond. People were put in danger, not because of what they did, but because of what Trump said. And that is the turning point, because this is no longer a matter of free speech. This is a matter of public safety. This is a matter of whether a leader is using his platform to incite violence against political opponents, and it is happening inside the same party that has spent years defending him. So the escalation is not just alarming, it is dangerous. It is the kind of escalation that makes people ask the question, what happens next? Because if a leader is willing to do this when he feels challenged, what will he do when he feels cornered? That is the moment the story stops being about politics and starts being about survival. And that is why the world is watching and why the stakes have never been higher. This is the moment the story shifts from Trump is out of control to Trump is a threat to the party itself. Because here's the thing, Republicans have defended him through everything. They've ignored scandals they've covered for him. They've justified his worst behavior. They've built careers around loyalty to Trump. But when the backlash starts to hit their own members, when the threats become real, when the violence becomes a direct consequence of Trump's words, even his most loyal allies begin to hesitate, and that hesitation is a huge deal. Because loyalty is the currency of Trump's movement. If loyalty can be broken, if it can be challenged, then the movement loses its foundation. So what happened? Within hours, some of Trump's most influential allies publicly spoke out, not quietly, not in private, publicly. On record, they said his behavior was unacceptable. They said it was dangerous. They said it threatened the stability of the country, and that is a big shift. It shows that the pressure isn't just coming from Democrats or the media. It is coming from within his own party. And when your own party starts questioning your fitness, you are no longer just a politician, you are a liability. One of the most shocking parts of this was the tone. It wasn't mild criticism. It wasn't, we disagree. It was a warning. It was a clear message that Trump's behavior is no longer tolerable, and that's the kind of message that can change the course of an election. Because when party leaders begin to publicly question the leader, it creates a domino effect. Other lawmakers start to think, if they are saying this, then maybe I can say it too. And suddenly the fear that has kept people silent starts to disappear. But it's not just about politics, it's about safety. Because these lawmakers are not only worried about their careers, they are worried about their families, they are worried about their staff, they are worried about the people they represent. They are worried about the reality that a single tweet or post can lead to death threats, harassment, and violence. And that is what makes this reaction so powerful. It is not just a political break. It is a moral break. It is a moment where the party is forced to decide what it stands for. Is it loyalty at all costs? Or is it the rule of law? Is it protecting a leader who incites violence? Or is it protecting the democratic system that keeps the country functioning? Because when lawmakers start calling for restraint, calling for accountability, and even calling for resignation, it means the party is facing a choice, and in politics, choices are everything. Because a party that cannot control its leader loses credibility, a party that cannot defend its own members loses legitimacy, and a party that chooses loyalty over the Constitution loses its future. That is why the reaction inside the party is one of the most important parts of this story. Because it reveals that the collision is not just between Trump and the law, it is between Trump and the country itself. And when that happens, the consequences are not just political, they are historic. Now we get to the part that makes this situation truly dangerous for Trump and also truly historic for the country. Because what Trump is doing right now is not just political drama. It is not just a meltdown, it is becoming a legal problem. And when power, ego, and the law collide, the law does not care about ego. It cares about evidence. And Trump is creating evidence with every post, every threat, every escalation. Think about it. When a leader uses language like traitors, they need to be dealt with, and patriots know what to do, legal experts immediately start asking the same question: is this incitement? Is this a threat? Is this an attempt to intimidate elected officials? Because that's what it looks like, and the consequences of that are huge. Because once the legal system starts treating these posts as evidence, Trump is no longer just fighting political opponents, he is fighting the justice system. And the justice system does not respond to loyalty, it responds to proof. Now, the legal arguments are complex, and there will be 1,000 debates about free speech and intent and context. But the reality is simple. Trump is pushing the boundaries of what a president can say, and he is doing it in public with a massive audience and with specific targets. And that is not normal. That is not typical. That is not the kind of language a leader uses when they are confident in their position. This is the kind of language a desperate person uses when they are trying to protect themselves. And when the law starts paying attention, desperation becomes a liability. But there is another layer to this. The legal stakes are not only about what Trump said. they are about what his supporters did after he said it, because the pattern is familiar. When Trump says something, his base often acts on it. When he calls someone a traitor, his supporters escalate. When he calls someone a threat, his supporters respond. When he tells them to deal with someone, they interpret that as permission. And that is the kind of chain that can turn political speech into criminal action. So the legal stakes are not hypothetical, they are real, and they are growing because as the courts and investigators review his posts, they are not just looking at the words, they are looking at the effect, they are looking at the calls, the threats, the security incidents, the intimidation. They are looking at the real world consequences of what Trump said. And when you add it all up, it creates a dangerous picture. A picture of a leader who is not just challenging the law, but trying to destroy it. And that is why the legal stakes are one of the most critical parts of this story. Because this is not just about Trump's behavior. It is about whether the justice system can hold up against the power of a president who refuses to follow the rules. And if the law fails, then the consequences for the country will be far greater than any political battle. Because the country will be left with a new precedent that leaders can intimidate lawmakers without consequence. And that is not a future anyone should want. Now we move into the part that explains why this is spiraling so fast and why Trump is losing control of the narrative. Because the truth is, Trump is not just fighting the courts, he is fighting the one thing he has always relied on: chaos. Trump's power has always depended on keeping everyone off balance. He thrives in chaos because chaos distracts from the facts. Chaos hides the details. Chaos makes people emotional, and emotions beat logic every time. But right now, chaos is not helping him. It is exposing him because chaos is no longer the tool. It is the evidence. Every meltdown, every threat, every public outburst, every post that sounds like a warning to the government, it all adds up. And it shows a man who is not in control, a man who is cornered. And when a leader is cornered, they do something predictable. They lash out, they escalate. They try to intimidate, they try to show strength, even when they don't have it. But the more Trump escalates, the more he confirms what his opponents have been saying for months, that he is unstable, that he is reckless, that he is not fit to lead. And this is where the biggest shift happens. Because Trump supporters are not only watching his words, they are watching his behavior. And when behavior becomes erratic, even the most loyal supporters begin to worry. Because loyalty has limits and people don't want to be on the losing side of history. They don't want to be associated with a leader who is openly attacking the legal system, the media, and the government. They don't want to be seen as part of a movement that is spiraling out of control. So even if Trump still has a loyal base, the danger is that the base begins to fracture. And that is exactly what is happening right now. Because the moment you see cracks in the support, you see the real danger for Trump. He can no longer control the story. He can no longer control the message. He can no longer control the outcome. And that is why this is not just a political moment. It is a collapse of a movement. Because once the movement realizes the leader is losing control, the movement starts to crumble. And that is when the courts, the media, and the opposition begin to close in. Because they can see the weakness, they can see the panic, they can see the desperation. And when desperation meets power, the result is never stable. So the real reason Trump is losing control is not just the legal pressure, it is the collapse of his ability to command the narrative. And that collapse is what makes this story so dangerous and so explosive. Because when a powerful leader loses control, the consequences do not stay in the courtroom. They spill into the streets. They spill into the government. They spill into the future of the country. And that is why this moment matters more than anyone is admitting right now. Now we're entering the final stretch, and this is where the real stakes become clear. Once the pressure reaches this level, things don't move slowly, they move fast. And when things move fast in politics, they get messy. First, the legal system will move even faster. Once the judge has shown he is willing to act quickly, the court's pace accelerates, deadlines shorten, motions stack up, and Trump's team will be forced to react instead of plan. When the judge's tone changes from "we'll consider this" to "we will act now," everything shifts. Second, the public starts to see a pattern. When the same story repeats in every court hearing, every media report, and every legal filing, people stop seeing it as a political attack. They start seeing it as a legal reality. The narrative changes from opinion to evidence, and that is when support begins to crack. Third, the Republican Party begins to fracture. The moment this becomes a real crisis, the party has to choose: support Trump no matter what, or protect the party's future. That decision is already being made behind closed doors, and when the party splits, the damage doesn't just stay inside Washington, it spreads across the entire country. Fourth, Trump's allies begin to distance themselves. When the risk becomes personal, people leave. When the cost becomes real, even the most loyal supporters start looking for the exit. That is how movements die, not in dramatic betrayals, but in quiet, practical departures. Fifth, the White House becomes a war zone. If Trump is still in office, the pressure will create chaos inside the administration. Staffers, advisors, and allies will start choosing sides, and leaks will explode. The internal tension will become public, and the public will watch every crack form in real time. Finally, the next move will be the most important one. Trump's next decision will determine the future of his entire movement. Will he escalate further? Will he negotiate? Will he attempt a power play? The next move will not just be political, it will be historical. Because this is not just another scandal. This is the moment where the American system is being tested, and the question is not whether Trump will win. The question is whether the system can hold. Because if the system breaks, the consequences will not be temporary, they will be permanent. So the final countdown has begun, and everyone is watching to see what happens next. This is the point where the story stops being about Trump alone and becomes something much bigger. Because what is unfolding right now is not just another political scandal or another legal fight. It is a stress test of the entire system. For decades, American democracy has relied on an assumption. The assumption that no matter how powerful someone becomes, the system will hold. The courts will function, Congress will act, the rules will apply. What Trump is doing challenges that assumption directly. He is testing whether intimidation works, whether pressure works, whether chaos can overpower the law, and that is why this moment matters so much. If Trump succeeds in silencing oversight through fear, if lawmakers learn that asking questions leads to threats, if judges learn that enforcing the law leads to public attacks, then the system does not just weaken. It changes. It becomes something else entirely. That is why so many people inside Washington are alarmed right now, even people who rarely agree on anything. Because once a leader shows that threats are effective, every future leader will learn the same lesson. The precedent becomes permanent. This is also why the public reaction matters more than ever. This is not a moment for apathy or distraction. History shows that systems do not collapse all at once. They erode slowly, incident by incident, excuse by excuse, until one day people realize too late that the guardrails are gone. Trump's behavior has forced a choice, not just for Republicans, not just for Democrats, but for the country. Either the rules apply to everyone or power decides everything. Either oversight is protected or intimidation becomes normalized. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Moments like this do not come often, but when they do, they define eras. The decisions made now by judges, by lawmakers, by voters will shape how power works for generations. That is why this is not just a headline, it is a warning about what happens when ego overrides law, when loyalty replaces accountability. When fear becomes a political tool, this story is still unfolding, the consequences are still forming. But one thing is already clear, after this moment, American politics will not be the same. The only question left is whether the system emerges stronger or whether this becomes the moment it began to fail, and that is why everyone should be paying attention.